We've got barbecue back here. You're all invited. Welcome to the Sloopcast. How are you doing today, Kyle?
Doing all right, Jared. Doing all right. How are you doing today, good sir?
Doing all right. Doing good. Doing good. Doing good. New tradition. Good tradition. There we go. Yeah, it was a good week, Kyle. It was a good week, unless you're 7 of the ranked teams that lost. 7 ranked teams. Now, we wouldn't call all of these chaos. Several of the losses came to other ranked teams, of course. But yeah, Indiana, Alabama, Ole Miss, all top 10. BYU, Texas A&M, Colorado, and Army. 7 losses in the top 25. An eventful week for chaos, to say the least.
Yeah, and there was quite a few close ones. As well too. Penn State with a 1-point victory, Boise State with a 4-point victory, Iowa State pulled it out with a 3-point victory. Could have had more. Could have had double digits here, Jared.
Yeah. That'd have been fun. Double digit chaos.
That would have been chaotic.
That's some 2007 stuff right there. Although this year, man, I don't. Has there been a lot more chaos this year, or is it just that we care more about like teams 8 through 16 now? It's the latter, right?
Honestly, I would say it's a little bit of both. Here. I think there's a lot of, there's 2 teams. I think there's 2 teams here that are just cut above the rest, and everybody else is kind of beating up each other, inconsistent. They're just not consistent at all. You never know what you're going to get when it comes to teams like Ole Miss and Alabama and Georgia. Not trying to pick on just SEC teams, but those are the first 3 that come to my mind here. Just inconsistent. You never know who you're going to get the coming week here.
Oh, I mean, the entire Big 12 is, to put it nicely, inconsistent.
Yep.
The ACC is 3 teams cut above the rest, but I don't think any of them are threats to win it all. It's, I mean, I don't know, man. I tell you what, I'm trying to talk about things without getting into specifics, because I didn't want to get into like a lot of specifics until we brought up the tier list. So let's just bring up the tier list. How about that?
Yeah. Yep. Let's do that.
Hey, it's the tier list, but before the tier list, Kyle got a 5-game lead on you with 2 weeks left in the Sloop Picks. It was not
a good week.
It's not insurmountable for you.
Yeah.
Kyle, you have gone 3-4 every week since week 8.
Consistent. Talking about consistency.
Yeah. Nutzak, aka Stuart, down in the chat. Since we're talking national football, the fact that the first 4 3-loss teams are all SEC crazy. I assume you're talking about the AP. I did. I'm not going to be like, I didn't even look at the AP today. I did. I looked at the AP today. I don't remember. I don't really remember what was on it, to be honest. I whatever. The AP can do whatever the AP wants. They're not relevant to me. Excuse me. Unless I'm doing Collegiate Chaos, then they're relevant to me, because we still are kind of forced to use them for not Collegiate Chaos. Excuse me. This is Collegiate Chaos for Chaos Theory. Speaking of, Kyle, I might have you in the sloot picks. However, because Minnesota doesn't know how to play to win,
Your Golden Gophers.
because Minnesota kicks a field goal that doesn't put them ahead in the fourth quarter and they never saw the ball again, instead of going for it, they kicked the field goal. Kyle, I would have secured it. A 22-point win right there,
That would have.
I think would have secured it for me.
That
Instead,
you know what?
You get
count,
10
though.
points, as do the guest pickers. You take the lead in Chaos Theory by 3 points. I might have to rethink my big swing strategy for the next 2 weeks. That's all I'm saying.
All right.
That's all I'm
you were
saying.
You were just going to the fences
a
lot. Like looking at here, yeah. You went to the fences pretty much almost every week since week 7.
I mean, yeah. I mean, even then, the week 1 was for 7 points. Week 2 was for 10 points. But everything after that has been 16 or higher.
Yeah.
Crazy. Okay,
right.
now let's get into the tier list.
Oregon was on a bye week. Talked about the Ohio State and Indiana game there. And Texas beat Kentucky 31-14.
Yeah, and
definitely, and the end score definitely seemed that way, but with 5 minutes left or something, it was still 14 or 5 minutes left in the second quarter. It was like 14-7 still, so it was still a really close game. But Texas scored a couple of points late in the first half to go up by 17 points and didn't look back from there.
Yeah, they've not looked great in recent weeks. Texas has not looked great in recent weeks. It's really starting to feel like a 2-team race, which in a 12-team playoff is probably an absurd thing to say. But man, it really does feel like it's Ohio State and Oregon right now.
Yeah.
Unless you want to talk about Notre Dame with dominant win, an absolutely dominant win over undefeated Army.
Dominant wins since their loss. Dare I say that? Dominant wins since their loss.
Yeah. Is it time to move them into S tier?
I think so. I honestly think so. I think it is time to put Notre Dame in S tier there.
Probably actually past time, to be honest. Does Texas still belong in S tier after another shaky performance? I mean,
I say they stay there. I say they stay in S tier.
Okay. I mean, they play Texas A&M this upcoming week, and
it may take care of itself here. So.
I don't know. Texas A&M. Speaking of shaky, Texas A&M, but we're not down to that tier yet. We'll talk about them later.
Yeah. Penn State. Jared mentioned earlier 1-point victory over his Golden Gophers there. Still got to stay in A tier because they're a playoff team, so they stay in A tier.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Boise still a playoff team for now.
They're still Yep, they still are.
A real shaky win over they've had a couple wins.
Yep.
Lately against some pretty bad teams. Like they won 17-13 over a terrible Wyoming team. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. They do have to play a Mountain West conference game. You have Tulane out there putting up big numbers, looking kind of good. Tulane didn't play this week, but last time we saw them, they beat Navy 35-0. They're one's in the American and one's in the Mountain West, so
yep,
not going to get a chance to like prove that on the field per se. But I'm starting to feel like Tulane's the more dangerous playoff team, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. SMU takes care of business over Virginia.
Yeah,
they stay there.
Absolutely. Take a quick peek at the ACC.
Yep.
SMU has officially clinched a championship game for the ACC. Miami is win and in if they beat Syracuse. Clemson needs Miami to lose. And obviously they need to win, right? Which South Carolina's been kind of a dangerous team lately. Clemson winning is not a given. So, we'll see how that plays out. My money's on Miami at this point.
Yeah, I think so. I think so as well. Is Miami done? I think they... No, not Miami. Clemson's done.
Clemson's done in conference. They play the Gamecocks this weekend. They're in state.
Mm-hmm. So what is the scenario here? So
I just
Miami wins, they move on, and then if Miami loses and Clemson wins, then they move on.
Correct.
That's the scenario.
Yeah, pretty simple.
Yep.
SMU's already in. Miami is winning in. Clemson needs to win and for Miami to lose.
Yep, and that's why I totally agree with how we have it here, that we have SMU in, and that Clemson and Miami is a bubble team.
Yeah, we might need to have a conversation about that in due time.
Okay.
I think the SEC. The SEC
Yeah.
had, again, like if I can go back to this list, losses this weekend: Indiana, Alabama, Ole Miss, BYU, Texas A&M, Colorado Army. Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas A&M all lost this weekend. We'll have a conversation about this a little bit later. Don't want to have this conversation yet. But last week we decided that it was going to be 4 Big Ten teams, 4 SEC teams, Notre Dame, and then 3 additional conference champions, presumably Boise, and then an ACC team and a Big 12 team, right? After this weekend, did the SEC fall to 3 teams? Could the ACC take one of those spots now? We'll have that conversation when we pick a pick a top 12. We'll have that conversation. Georgia.
Yep.
Georgia sails to a good win. No real drama, I would say, in Athens this weekend. I mean, how good is it really if... Listen, Ohio State fans were freaking out that Indiana scored first. Imagine being down 7-0 to UMass. I mean, it was 21-14 to UMass at one point. Not a great showing early from Georgia. That being said, it's UMass. They eventually piled the points on, but regardless.
I mean, they're still one of the better teams here. It's
Listen,
just
in week 13,
inconsistent.
In week 13, if you won, you're fine. It's
true.
Like you if you're Georgia, you picked a good week to kind of look crappy against a overmatched opponent because there's so much that happened. Just no one's going to notice or care.
Yeah. All right. The other teams here that were in our playoff team, our A tier, all lost. Ole Miss, Alabama, BYU, and the Hoosiers.
I'm going to say this right now. I'm just going to pull this Band-Aid off. Indiana, this is their first loss of the season. They remain in A tier. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. You're going to hear it all week, Jared.
I don't.
Everybody. You're going to hear all week. Indiana doesn't deserve to be in. They lost their one important game of the year.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing.
To one of the best teams in the country.
But it wasn't competitive. If it were competitive.
Neither was Alabama, who lost to Oklahoma.
That's a different conversation.
Don't.
That's a different conversation.
Yeah, like,
Kyle, that's a different conversation. We're the conversation right now is how deserving is Indiana, and in a 12-team play. If we were having a 4-team playoff conversation, I'd be like, yeah, Indiana's done. Bye, Indiana.
I would agree.
Yeah, you had your one chance to prove it against a great team, and you blew it. You're done. Go home. But this is a 12-team playoff. The math is different.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like, Indiana's still a good football team. They're still one of the 12 best teams in the country. Now, they might be 10th and not 5th, but they're still one of the best 12 teams in the country. They have earned that.
Yeah. They won't. Nobody's going to go to Bloomington for the first round.
Well, they still might, quite frankly.
Maybe. But yeah, Indiana stays. I cannot, after what I've seen here with Ole Miss losing to Florida, Alabama losing to Oklahoma, can keep those two teams in A tier. I cannot do that. So
okay,
those two teams would have to move down.
Okay, but the conversation becomes, who do you replace them with?
Sure. Yeah.
But before we have the SEC conversation, let's have a Big 12 conversation. Can we do that? Arizona State beats BYU. We got to flop them, right? We got to flip-flop them.
Well, so what is the scenario we have with the BYU, or not BYU, with the Big 12?
Oh, that's a clusterfuck. I mean, to say it Frenchly.
Okay, so here's the thing.
You know what? You take care of this. I'm going to sit down.
Shouldn't all of these teams be a playoff bubble technically?
No.
Because technically, if the most chaotic of chaos things happen, Texas Tech could get in. West Virginia could get in. TCU could get in.
Yeah.
Again, if the most chaotic of chaos happens.
Yeah. Listen, Austin, who has filled in for Kyle in the past on this show, one of our mods in the server, author of Austin's Over-Unders, he's a good guy. In our Discord server, he wrote out all the playoff scenarios for everybody. He stopped after Colorado. He's like, technically all 8 of these teams are could possibly get in, which is psychotic. There's one more regular season week left. How are there still 8 teams in contention for the Big 12? Well, that's because they're all either 6-2 or 5-3 in conference. That's how. So, Kyle, let's just stick to the 6-2 teams. Can we please just stick to the 6-2 teams? Let's draw the line below Colorado. Let's leave Baylor, KSU, TCU, Texas Tech, and West Virginia out of this conversation.
Okay.
Okay. So, first and foremost, can I move Iowa State into B tier?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I think those 4 teams would need to be at least B tier, which that would be the last team there. So
Okay.
So,
Secondly,
yes,
Arizona State
I would,
beat BYU. We currently have Arizona State in B tier. We currently have BYU in A tier. I think we need to flip-flop those.
I would flip them.
Okay.
I would flip them.
Arizona State makes their debut in A tier. And I mean, since we've done this, since we've been doing, I don't mean this season. That's the first time we've ever had ASU this high.
BYU goes down to B tier.
Yes, they do. Now, let's have okay, let me rearrange things here. I'm going to slide these guys over. All right. We need to have a conversation. Who gets the last 2 spots?
2. Mm-hmm.
Who gets the last 2 spots? Yeah. And in A tier, or in our S and A tiers.
I can.
So
I'll definitely have a conversation with this. But first, we'll take a quick ad break here. So, thesloopcast.com is our landing page. Everything and anything and everything Sloopcast related. Here you can find the Patreon page, Discord, YouTube, our merch store, Spotify, everything related to the Sloopcast over at thesloopcast.com. So we'll go ahead and take our first ad break and be right back.
Stuart in the chat says, I think B tier needs stacked, not continuously adding to A. Well, we're not continuously adding to A. A has to, because we have 4 teams in S tier, and because this functions as our playoff prediction. That's what this is. I went back to the wrong scene. I do that all the time. One day I'll learn. This is essentially our playoff prediction. Kyle and I are essentially saying with S tier has 2 too many. I think we should drop Texas. I asked Kyle. He said no. I didn't feel like fighting about it. I would have dropped Texas, but I gave Kyle the say on that. But I do think Notre Dame deserves to be in that conversation. Now, we have 4 teams in S tier: Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Notre Dame. And again, since the combination of S tier and A tier functions as our 12-team playoff prediction, that means we need to have 8 teams in A tier to total 12 between the two. Who says I can't do math? So, currently in A tier, Penn State, Boise, SMU, Georgia, Indiana, Arizona State. And for those of you who weren't counting, that is 2 too few. So we need to add 2 teams into A tier to make our playoff prediction. I would say, Kyle, I with all due respect, Louisiana Lafayette and Tulane, I slid them out of the conversation. Adults are talking. We're good on Big 12, right? Like, we're not going to add a second Big 12 team? Correct?
Correct. Yep, correct.
So, Colorado, BYU, Iowa State, they can jump over to the left as well. Or, excuse me, the right. I can do math, but I don't know my left from my right. So that leaves us with 5 teams to fill 2 spots for a playoff prediction. Those 5 teams are Alabama, Miami, Clemson, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. I'd say put 2 in S, 6 in A, and put the bubble. No, that all season we've had the rule be 12 between S and A. There needs to be 12 teams total. We can do 2 and 10 or 4 and 8. We can do 1 and 11, but the combination of S and A tier functions as our playoff prediction and has all season.
So I would say an A tier, even though they had the loss a couple of weeks ago to Georgia Tech. I almost feel like I got to put Miami up in A tier there. Similar to kind of like Indiana. Don't really have any like really key wins here,
right?
But they've looked dominant in most of their games. So I would compare Miami to Indiana in a way too. So I would vote Miami to be one of the teams in A tier.
Okay. I'm gonna move them up there for now. I'm not necessarily co-signing that yet.
Mm-hmm. Then the last thing that I will say here, because I think there's one of the two teams, Miami is my vote. Alabama and Ole Miss, I think, needs to be out of the discussion here. Teams with 3 losses in here, like I understand that who you beat really matters, but like who you lose to matters almost as much as well too.
So can I ask you why is 3?
I feel like Clemson and Tennessee, who have less losses, should be having that discussion of going in ahead of Alabama and Ole Miss.
Okay. In 2022, Utah and Kansas State in the final playoff committee rankings. So, the last one before they did the play. You know what I'm saying? Utah and Kansas State were 8 and 9. Both of them had 3 losses. So 2 3-loss teams in 2022 placed in the top 12. In 2019, Wisconsin, sitting at 10 and 3, was number 8 in the final committee rankings. Setting the mark at 3 losses and trying to stick to that as like a rule, I don't know if that's a good precedent, especially considering a bunch of these teams are going to pick up losses during conference championship week. And you can say that the conference championship loss is different if you want to say that. We can have that conversation. But I don't know if setting a hard and fast rule that 3 losses eliminates you from the playoff is how it's going to work. We haven't had a...
I could not put Alabama ahead, because then like the loss to Tennessee, who they would be ahead of, like,
okay,
why did they play then?
We agree.
I think,
hold on, this we agree on. I do believe that Tennessee belongs in A tier. We agree on that.
Okay.
To me, I think the more interesting conversation boils down to Miami, Alabama, and Ole Miss.
Not including Clemson in there?
No. Listen, the ACC was garbage this year. I kind of don't even feel good about including 2 ACC teams. If anyone below, first off, like SMU, Clemson, and Miami, what would, if any of those teams had to play the schedule that Ohio State has played, that Alabama has played, what would their records be? I'm not going to say I know, but I'm saying it would be more than 2 losses.
That's nobody's going to know, and that's, you can make that argument. You can have that kind of conversation with with most conferences too. Like pick a team in most conferences. You're not going to know. It's a statement that no one will ever have the answer to. So I feel like that's not really a fair question to ask. Because there's no way to prove it. There's no way to.
That's a fair
to counter that.
That's a fair point. Honestly, no, you're right. That's a fair point. But let me pivot then. Instead of saying who did you lose to, can we ask the question who did you beat?
Okay. All right. So
let's get the three best wins. Let's wins.
Do the three in the
total just
worst loss. Let's do three best wins and worst loss. Okay. Because I feel that's probably should be part of the decision making in here as well too, because we're coming down to the line of really nitpicking that last spot, and we knew this was going to happen.
Sure.
When they introduced the 12 team or
absolutely
12 team playoff.
You just moved the controversy further down the line.
Yep, exactly. Yep. So Miami's best wins here. Florida, which is looking like a better win now.
No. Florida's just different with Lagway at quarterback. I'm sorry. If you didn't beat Lagway, it doesn't count. You can't use what Florida is doing now versus what Florida was doing then. Anyway, I hear you.
Florida, Louisville, and I guess you put Virginia Tech. So not the greatest win columns. Not the greatest win columns.
No.
Okay.
Alabama's three best wins.
Well, I will also say that their worst loss is a 5-point loss on the road against Georgia Tech.
Okay.
All right. Alabama's three best wins. Georgia.
Uh-huh.
LSU, Missouri.
Yeah. I mean, that's...
Yeah, obviously the Georgia one's the big one.
All three of those are better than any one of Miami's.
Yeah. I would agree. I would agree with that. But
didn't Bama also beat Florida this year?
No.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
But Alabama has had that loss to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt hasn't. They looked good like in the middle of the season and not as much
sure
after that. They seem to kind of fallen off here, losing 3 of their last 4 games here. And then obviously this last week only putting up 3 points to Oklahoma.
Sure.
That's a bad loss.
I thought we were only doing I thought we were only doing one loss.
Okay. All right.
I feel like you're stacking.
The worst loss, sorry.
I feel like you're stacking.
You're right. You're right. The worst loss is against Oklahoma. You put up 3 points. It was a non-contest game.
Yeah.
Against Oklahoma here.
Who's what, 500? Right. Are they 6-5 now?
Yep, they're 6-5. Yeah. That was their second SEC win.
Yeah. No, it's bad loss. Bad loss.
I know it's a totally different year. This was years ago, and things are graded differently in 2024. But like Ohio State got railed, and I mean railed, when they lost to Purdue, and they lost bad.
Yeah.
Alabama should be held to that same standard, where they have a great win.
Ohio State would have made a 12. Ohio State would have made a 12-team playoff that year.
I understand, but they lost bad.
Okay.
To Oklahoma.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
But Ohio State would have made a 12-team playoff that year.
All right. Ole Miss, and then Ole Miss won. Their best wins is Georgia as well.
Mm-hmm. He's looking.
I'm trying to figure out. I'm really trying to figure. I guess South Carolina.
Yeah, probably.
And in Oklahoma.
Really? That's Ole Miss's three best wins?
Their wins is Furman, MTSU, Wake Forest, Georgia Southern, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Georgia.
Okay, you know what? Yeah. We're done here, Ole Miss. No, I'm with you on that. We're done with Ole Miss. Shits and gigs. Who are Clemson's best 3 wins, and what's their worst loss?
Sure. And Ole Miss's worst loss, I guess it's Kentucky.
Yeah,
they lost to Kentucky.
We're done with Ole Miss.
All right, and Tennessee's best wins is against Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're talking about Clemson. Sorry.
Yeah.
Clemson's
different orange team.
Clemson's best wins is I'm just comparing what their current record current records are. So,
okay.
Pitt.
Oh, God, that's your opening.
That is my opening. Virginia.
Oh, good Lord.
You're right.
I'm just sliding them over. We're done here, Kyle.
I couldn't even pick a third one.
Now, how you want to talk about their worst loss now? You want to talk about a loss being so bad that it's disqualifying now?
It's a similar to Alabama, but it is in our S&A tier. Is a non-contest against Georgia in week 1.
Yeah. All right. So the conversation boils down to Miami versus Alabama. So the question before us is, do you care more about the quality of their loss or the quality of their wins? Or I guess the quantity of their losses also plays a factor here. Stewart says Army's worst loss was to one of your S tier teams. Seems they need to be in consideration. Okay, I tell you what, we're not going to do it, but Stewart, why don't you go ahead and put who you think Army's best wins are against in the chat? I'll help you out. The first one is Eastern Carolina. The first one's Eastern Carolina. That's Army's best win. Big if true.
Here, I put them side by side here, Jared.
All right, that's not going to help our listeners. That window's too small.
I know it's not, but for us visually looking at them there, that's the schedules there with Miami.
Hold on, actually might be able to.
Miami's on the left and Alabama's on the right.
That's not bad. I don't know if it's good, but it's not bad. Can I zoom in? I can.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, we can see.
All right, here's our two.
I agree. Miami as of now.
Yeah, I mean that's what we're doing. We're doing what we have right now. So on the left is Miami, on the right is Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Kyle, but Florida in week 1 was terrible. They hadn't found their way yet. Then Florida A&M, Ball State, South Florida, Virginia Tech, not a terrible team, but they only win that by 4 points. They played Cal, who is terrible, beat them by 1 point. Louisville, who just got their shit knocked in by SMU this weekend, they only win that game by 7 points. They beat Florida State, but who hasn't?
SMU beat Virginia.
Was that last week they played? And it doesn't matter. May have been last week. Florida State, Duke, Kyle, they beat Duke by 2 points. No? Am I just totally wrong? Okay, I'm just misremembering.
You're just totally wrong.
That's fine. They lose to Georgia Tech.
Louisville lost to Stanford.
Okay.
Which that might be worse.
It's definitely worse. And like it's also, Kyle, that a lot of their wins against a lot of these bad teams weren't even impressive wins. Oh, by the way, Duke, that's 31 for Duke. They beat Duke by a lot. Never mind. But they barely beat Louisville. One score wins against Louisville, California, Virginia Tech. Over on the Alabama side, cupcake in week 1, cupcake in week 2. They beat Wisconsin by 32 points. They beat Georgia by, what would that be? 6-7 points. So
7.
Still a score game. They lose to Vanderbilt by 5 points. South Carolina, who's a decent team, they win that by only 2. They lose to Tennessee by a touchdown. They rocked Missouri. They rocked LSU. Then they played Mercer, and then they got rocked by Oklahoma. We are splitting hairs at this point.
Yeah.
But Alabama has the better wins.
How is Missouri still ranked?
I don't care what the
AP.
I don't care what the AP does.
They're no show in every single game, or every single game that matters.
It just means more, Kyle. Apparently the same things with Ole Miss, actually. Kyle, let's take a quick ad break, and when we come back, we're just going to choose one of these two teams. I think we spent this entire segment just figuring out who to put in these two slots. So we're going to do a quick ad break, very quick ad break, as a matter of fact. Go find all of our links to all of our stuff at thesloopcast.com. And subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.thesloopcast.com. Like our videos, leave a comment, do all that crap. All right, we're back. I told you that was going to be a quick ad break. I'm voting for Alabama. I am more concerned about who you beat as opposed to the losses. That's just my take. Are you picking Miami?
Yeah, I got to pick Miami because, like, I understand, yes, Alabama has the better wins, but that recently with Alabama, a complete no-show in Norman there against Oklahoma, like, that just leaves such a bad taste in my mouth. Like, you win against Georgia in week 4 or 5 early in the season, and now looking here, like, this is the time when you needed to be on your A game. This is you need to show up. You need to play your best right now. And Alabama is not. Alabama's not right now. So I got to put Miami ahead.
I put Miami in A tier.
Losses do matter. So losses do matter.
I let Stuart in the chat be the tiebreaker between us. But here's the thing. Everyone always says losses matter, losses matter, losses matter. You know what? Wins matter too. And the quality of those wins, not just that you won, but who you beat should also matter.
if Alabama had two losses here, like let's say they beat Oklahoma, even if they barely beat them, I would have taken Alabama over Miami. There have been no questions in my mind, no questions. But the way that they lost against Oklahoma matters. It truly does matter. Like 3 losses versus 1 loss, and it's a really bad loss too. Like that, to me, that matters. And I hear you, and I do agree to a degree that wins matter more. Who you beat matters more than who you lost to. But to a team, a 500 team, and you only put up 3 points against them, you lost by 21. That's not a good look. That is not a good look for Alabama. It's one of the worst things that could happen to them for their resume to make the playoffs.
Okay. We've spent too much time on it. All right. So in B tier, we have Alabama, we have Clemson, we have Ole Miss. We got Tulane and Louisiana Lafayette, sort of making sure we have some teams from the Group 5 represented. Our Big 12 contingency is Iowa State, BYU, and Colorado.
Yep.
They're literally still in contention, and unlike a lot of the Big 12 teams, like legitimate contention to go to their conference championship games. So based off of that, I think Iowa State, BYU, and Colorado need to remain in B tier. Yes?
Yep. I would agree with that.
Texas A&M goes, and I realize Texas A&M just lost, and we could, but we're not going to. We could have a conversation about their resume. They also have 3 losses. However, they go to the SEC championship game with a win this weekend.
Yep, and that's why they stay in B tier.
Hey, Stuart, can you earmuffs real quick, buddy? Earmuffs real quick, Stuart. We're taking Army out of B tier, right? First real game, and they got their shit knocked in. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
As much as I would love to have Army in the playoffs, just because, but it's got to happen.
Yeah. Okay. I got Kansas State and TCU and Texas Tech. I got that moved over to the left of C tier just because it's technically possible.
Yes.
Hey, guess what? We still have Missouri in C tier, and they're not moving. They're staying right there.
Yeah.
Are you happy with this tier list that you currently see? Is this good?
I think so. I think so. We talked about a week ago. If Oklahoma lost, we would put them in M tier. They just saved their season from going to M tier.
Yeah, they did. Well, Stuart told us to suck a tailpipe, by the way.
The same thing with Florida. Florida saved themselves from going to M tier as well.
I don't think the expectations were that high for Florida. Their season really changed once Lagway got rolling. They're a different team now than they were at the beginning of the year, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Kyle, I was watching Oklahoma, by the way. This needs to be said.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they've not had a spectacular season. They've had a pretty mid-season.
Yep.
They currently, off of their roster, are missing their top 5 wide receivers and 4 of their offensive linemen.
Yeah, I knew they were losing. They lost a bunch. I knew that.
That's rough. I'm just saying that's rough.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Shout out to the Red Hawks of Miami of Ohio.
Okay.
Who received a single vote in the coaches poll.
There you go. Was it by the Miami coach?
I don't know.
Was it another MAC coach? That's funny. Yeah, I think we're done here. I think this is the tier list. I'm
James Madison has one as well.
I'm a little bit surprised. I'm a little bit surprised that we got 2 ACC teams in there. Little bit surprised we got 2 ACC teams in the playoff right now.
I mean that's what happens when you have two of your top, well, not the top, but in your top conference to lose. That's on
3.
the road.
Hey, Kyle.
Like
3.
That's what happens.
3. Texas A&M, Ole
Oh,
Miss,
yeah,
and Alabama.
3. Yeah, you're right. 3. Yes, you're right. 3.
Yeah. Rough weekend. An unlucky week 13 for the SEC, for sure. All right, that's it. We're done. We're done here. Oh, by the way, maybe one more thing. The American Athletic Conference, their playoff is set. Or excuse me, their conference title is set. Army versus Tulane. Worth noting. I think that's the only one that's firmly set. The Big Ten, Oregon is already in. Ohio State's in with a win. So, Indiana could get in if both Ohio State and Penn State lose. And of course they beat Purdue. Georgia is locked into the SEC title game. And the winner of Texas versus Texas A&M gets the other slot in the SEC title game. We already talked about the ACC, the Big 12. All right. The Big 12.
It's a mess.
Hold on, let's do this. If Arizona State wins, they're in.
Yep.
Done. Iowa State is in if they win.
So that would be your easiest ones. Arizona State, Iowa State wins, they're in.
Yeah, that's it. Now BYU needs to win over Houston, and an Arizona State loss to Arizona or an Iowa State loss to Kansas State. So BYU just needs either of the first 2 teams to lose, and obviously they need to win.
Mm-hmm.
Colorado gets in if they beat Oklahoma State and BYU loses. And a combination of Arizona State and Iowa State. One of either, so it has to be BYU.
Has to be BYU. Yep.
And then either Arizona State and Iowa State. And that's how Colorado gets in.
Yes.
See ya, Stuart. And if you want to know how Baylor or TCU gets in, Google it. We're not going there. We're not doing it. Okay, now that's the end of the show. Do you have anything in Kyle's corner?
At the start of the season, Ohio State was a 10-point favorite. For the game.
Yep.
There was as much as Saturday evening. That point spread for the game this weekend went up as high as 23.5 points. It is now steady right now at about 20.5 as we're recording this.
Yeah, when the lines opened this morning, some books had it at 20 and some books had it at 23. So it depended upon which book you looked at. I don't know if that's still the case or not.
FanDuel had it at 23.5. DraftKings has it at 22. So, yeah, it just depends on where you're looking at. So between 20 and 23. It's a lot, Jared. That's a lot.
It
So
sure is.
for a rivalry game that's typically close historically, that's a lot.
Listen, I think
It says here that this would be tied for the second largest in recent history of this rivalry, spanning back to 1985.
there you go. We'll see if it's
The
still
only
there when CBS
the
locks it.
only meeting the only meeting between the teams exceeding such a line would have been in 2014, and that saw Ohio State still failing to cover that 42-28. But it said the next result was in 2008, where Buckeyes were a 20.5 point favorite, and they won 42-7 against Rich Rod's team in his first year. So maybe we got new head coach this year. Maybe we'll see a 42-7 victory.
I'm still looking for that 100-0 person. Listen, I think Ohio State has a very real chance at shutting out Michigan this weekend. And I think that Ohio State is very likely to score more than 30 points this weekend. So I think a 20-point cover is totally doable. Michigan's offense is a lot worse than Indiana's. A lot worse than Indiana's. And, you know, Indiana has some really good defensive tackles, and so does Michigan. That's going to be an issue. I don't think Ohio State's going to run the ball great against Ohio State. And if you want, or I don't think Ohio State's going to run the ball great against Michigan, is what I meant to say. But if you want to hear us talk more about that, then tune in to Know Your Enemy on Thursday, because we'll be going over that game. And by that game, I mean the game in detail on Thursday on Know Your Enemy. But Kyle, can I do a quick invasion of Kyle's Corner?
Okay.
The heat has been turned back up between Ohio State and one Mr. David Sanders, who is an offensive tackle who, before the football season started, committed to Tennessee. He is one of maybe the best offensive tackle in the 2025 recruiting class. He made a surprise visit to Ohio State this past weekend. And he isn't the type of kid to take a visit just to take a visit. He's very deliberate. His family, very deliberate. Like, I'm just going to say, I'm not guaranteeing, for sure not guaranteeing anything. But what I'm saying is, there's some smoke. I don't know how big the fire is. But yes, there's a lot of smoke, and yes, there is fire. I don't know how big the fire is. Maybe the fire gets put out. But there's definitely some fire behind the smoke. This would be an enormous win for Ohio State. And, you know, Ohio State has a couple players currently in their committed class who I personally have on Flip Watch. And I, by the way, constantly have a running mock class for both 25 and 26 in the Discord server, discord.sloopguys.com. Always be plugging. So you can come see those mock classes on the Discord server if you want to. And also I'll just talk to you about it on the Discord server too. I'm around. So come join the Discord server. Keep an eye on David Sanders. On the bad sign, keep an eye on Offord, the Alabama native cornerback who visited Auburn again this weekend. And I think has officially come out and said he's going to be announcing on signing day, despite the fact that he is currently committed to Ohio State, but that's just how this goes sometimes.
Yep.
So quick recruiting update. Big, lots of happenings in the recruiting realm this past weekend. Anything else, or is it time to end the show?
I think we're good.
I think we're good too. Tonight's ending music will be brought to you by Two Cow Garage, a Columbus-based band, sort of folk punky, I guess. So with all that being said, I'd like to encourage everyone to drink local beer, listen to local music, and of course, support local podcasters. Once again, this is Two Cow Garage.